Hi everybody, Dan here. I want to review the first chapter because it covers a very interesting concept, and that is frame of reference. We can never assume identical frames of reference when we are communicating to even an individual, but certainly a group. For example, if I'm talking about football to a group, half the people may be thinking of the NFL, and those from another culture may be thinking soccer. So differing frames of reference affect the way I should encode my message, and certainly it affects the way the message is decoded. Let me give you an example. The Hubble Space Telescope. You're familiar with that, right? This is the enormous telescope that was launched beyond our atmosphere to escape all kinds of atmospheric distortion. When this thing was first launched, I was on pins and needles because this is my hobby. I have a big telescope. I have a van that has to carry my telescope. And of course, the entire scientific community was waiting with bated breath for these images from deep space to be transmitted back to Earth. When they were, it was an incredible disappointment. They were out of focus. Why were they out of focus? Because the scientists at Jet Propulsion Lab, when communicating to the engineers at their subcontractor, Lockheed Martin, were speaking in terms of inches, and Lockheed Martin was thinking in terms of centimeters. That simple. In other words, that simple of a distortion, of a differing frame of reference. And bear in mind that these people are rocket scientists. They're the biggest brains in the universe, and they weren't communicating. I'll give you another example. Without the biggest brains in the universe, I'll use me as an example. My wife wanted wood flooring in our home. And of course, like all husbands, I resisted. And like all husbands, I gave in. So I said, all right, you got what you want. At least let me handle this. Let me deal with the contractors. I'm a sales guy. I know how to handle contractors. And she said, okay. So I finally found a wood flooring contractor that I liked and kind of trusted. And we're on the phone. I ended my conversation like this. Okay, I'll see you at 10 o'clock Monday morning. And he said, great, Dan, I'll see you at 10 o'clock Monday morning. Monday morning came along, and at 10 o'clock, I was in his showroom, and he was at my home, knocking on the door when nobody was there. Now, why was that? Well, I assumed he wanted me in his showroom so I could see all of these samples. He assumed I wanted him at my home so he could see the actual layout. And I teach this stuff. Here's another example. One of my students is a police officer, and he was telling me when he first got out of the academy, he was justifiably proud of his uniform and his training, and very happily entered his patrol area. And he found that the people there did not share his high opinion of himself. And by the way, I think the high opinion is totally justified. I think police are the good guys and the gangsters are the bad guys. Well, the citizens in his, we'll call it a beat, actually those of you who are familiar with LA will recognize Rampart Division. The citizens that he had to deal with were immigrants from Central America, and they reacted to him with suspicion and even fear. Now, why was that? Well, differing frames of reference. For these people, the police in Central America are corrupt and just as bad as the bad guys. And so he had to overcome that differing frame of reference, but at first he was kind of confused. Why are they not liking me? So there are differing frames of references are based on differing values, and there are differing cultural values wherever you go. I remember one of my students telling me that he had an assistant who was Asian, and this assistant never looked him in the eye. So what did my student, a manager, what did he assume? He assumed that his assistant was evasive and sneaky and untrustworthy. He found out later that his assistant would not look him in the eye out of respect, because eye contact is considered rude. Or you would only give eye contact to somebody you considered an equal. When you were in the company of somebody you considered superior, you would lower your eyes. Imagine how my manager felt when he discovered that. We have to remember that the message that counts is the one that is received, not the one in our head that we think we are transmitting. So how do we determine whether that has been encoded properly? Well, we have to ask. We have to ask the people that we are trying to communicate with. Let's say you're at work and you're giving a directive to somebody named Sam. You might say something like, Sam, my wife or my husband, tells me I'm not always clear. If you were to relay this directive to Sally, what would you tell her? And then you just stand back and listen to Sam, and you'll know immediately if he interpreted the messages correctly. Or you could say, hey, Sam, would you take a minute and just sit down and scribble out a paragraph? Nothing formal, just handwrite out a paragraph as to your understanding of this directive and how you plan to go about implementing it. This is what they do in the military, by the way, and it's a great practice. Because when you read that paragraph, you'll know immediately if your message was decoded the way you hoped. Without some kind of feedback mechanism, you'll never know if you're on the same page with the person you are trying to communicate with. It's important for us to get feedback as well from others. I think before a presentation, you should rehearse it in front of as many audiences as you can, and the tougher the audience, the better. Now, I know that not everybody will do this, but when I say a tough audience, I mean maybe your wife or your husband, or your mother-in-law, or somebody who's not afraid to be critical, because you cannot properly evaluate yourself. When I rehearse in front of a mirror, I think I'm a genius. And then I go out there in real life and give the presentation, and I'm not so much of a genius. Humor especially needs feedback. I can't tell you how many jokes I thought personally were hysterical, and they fell completely flat in front of my audience. Remember, humor is also based on frame of reference. I can think of a political joke I made one time in front of an audience that alienated half of the audience, because I was assuming they were of the same persuasion I was, and so it completely backfired. This is an interesting graphic, and I titled it, Never Let the Facts Speak for Themselves. If you look at the graphic here, you'll see that the audience doesn't learn much from your words. They learn much more from how you say them. Really, there are two kinds of people in this world, those who give you the information and those who try to sell the information. Very often, logical people see no reason to embellish their message. They let the facts speak for themselves. Here's the information. That's their feeling. Here's the information. I mean, it's self-evident, right? But it's not. The facts never speak for themselves because people have differing frames of reference. You've got to sell it. By that I mean explain the benefits to the audience. Reach out to the audience. Words are not enough. Frankly, I wish this weren't so, because I'm a writer. I wish words were everything. But they're not paid attention to. As I say, people don't listen to what we say, but how we say it. So the delivery is more important than the words. It's a sad fact of life. And why do I say sad? Because I think this opens the door for speakers who are expert at manipulating audiences through showmanship and not through the integrity of their material. But it's a fact of life. We can't let the facts speak for themselves. The book talks about internal noise when we are speaking, noise that we're hearing in our head. One is perhaps we might have a cold. I think this is actually kind of a funny bullet here, because we're always physically ill before a presentation. We're always queasy. We're always a little dizzy. So, I mean, this is an internal noise, and we have to deal with it. Here's another one, lack of sleep. As if you might have lack of sleep before an important presentation. You will. Maybe not because you're nervous, but because you're rehearsing that thing in your head, and it's hard to turn it off. nervousness is an internal noise. If we hear ourselves talk, oh my God, I'm so nervous, that's an internal noise. And as I said in week 1, in that screencast, we have to reframe it. We have to say, instead of, oh my God, I'm so nervous, we say, I am pumped. I am full of energy. It's the same with this, and I talked about this on week 1. If your audience knows more about the topic than you do, you're going to have a lot of internal noise. Oh my God, I'm an imposter. Oh my God, they know more than I do. You have to shine the light on them and thank them for being there, because they're going to keep you on track. Preoccupation with other problems. You may have something that has to be done at work. Your kids have to be picked up. Someone's got to be taken to the dentist, whatever. That and all these other distractions have to be put out of your consciousness just for the time that you're giving the presentation. And you have to focus on the meaning of your talk. If you focus on the meaning of your talk, you'll never get stage fright. Or if you do get stage fright, you will get out of it. External noise is more easily controlled. If there are conversations taking place in your audience, or if there are people's phones ringing or binging because of texting, or if they're actually texting, or if there are audio-visual problems. By the way, never fall in love with your PowerPoint. Always know it to the point where if there's a failure of the equipment that's out of your control, you may have to give your presentation the old-fashioned way without any audio-visual support. Or there might be handouts being thumbed through. That's why I always say delay your handouts until you're done speaking. But whatever is taking place externally, don't be shy about taking control. Ask your audience to put the phones away. Tell your audience how you're going to handle the questions. Tell your audience there'll be a handout, but afterwards. Always take control of your audience, because an audience will walk all over you if they sense weakness. Okay, everybody. Thank you for participating in this screencast, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.